The Wiregrass Museum of Art created the Intergenerational Learning Project to give students like me the opportunity to learn from those in other generations. We hope you will learn more about your history and become an ally to your neighbor after watching this film.
I'm Anna Barfield. I go to Northview. I'm 17. I used to live in a small town. I'm excited to interview Miss Laney because I'm actually really interested on how she grew up.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Laney. I'm the widow of a military serviceman. He was in the military for 26 years. I'm the mother of 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. I live in Dothan, Alabama, but we spent most of our years at Fort Rucker because my husband was usually associated with Fort Rucker, and he either flew or instructed there. We spent a lot of our time overseas. We spent 2 tours in Europe, so we've really gotten to see the world. All my kids have been to places that most kids would, haven't even thought of. Well, when I was a teenager, World War II was going on.
Okay.
And I was going to school, and we participated in all kind of drives that we had. We saved newspaper, we saved metal, we saved anything that was salvageable. We saved toward the war effort. Mm-hmm. And it was a time that, a war was going on, but yet the people were so close and worked together, and we're all for the same purpose, all the same cause. There were no squabbles between the Democrats and the Republicans. It was just a good time, really, of the nation being together. As far as the culture, it was really not. I think probably our country suffered less than most. Well, I know we did better than in Europe, who really took the brunt of it. But things were rationed. You could only get so much gasoline, mm-hmm. and when you went to the grocery store, you could only get so much beef or sugar.
Let's see. Where and when did you meet your husband?
On New Year's Eve in 1946, I think it was, he decided he was going to hitchhike to Savannah, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And so the military used to hitchhike a lot back during those days. And so he hitched a ride to Albany, where my home was, and he spent the night there. And the next morning he saw the name of the hotel, which was the New Albany Hotel, and he recognized the name Albany, that his new sister-in-law lived there. And so he called, and I answered the telephone. He called and he asked me if my mother and I would like to go out for dinner. And my mother said, "Oh no, I don't want to go." And I said, "But I'll go." So we went to see Gilda. It was a movie with Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford. Sweetie, I couldn't tell you what that movie was about. I could not tell you. I was so involved. But anyway, I'm about to go back to see that movie so I can see what it's about. Yeah. But anyway, he would come to, it was only 87 miles from Fort Benning to Albany, so he would come down just about every weekend. He would come down and he would bring 3 or 4 of his buddies, and I would have to get girls for the boys. And we'd go to Riverbend roller skating, we'd go to the movies, or we'd go someplace and dance. But anyway, we really had a lot of fun back in those days. And then after we married, I joined him in Germany. And oh, here I was, a little Georgia girl that had hardly been out of the state of Georgia, going to Germany, and I'd never traveled. And the reason the husbands went over, the reason the wives went over to join the husbands in Germany right after World War II, the GIs were so bad with those German women that they sent the wives over to calm their husbands, to kind of shape up their husbands. Now that's the truth. So
I'm sure it worked.
but anyway, I don't think Ike was that much of a problem. But anyway, I went to Germany. That was my first trip, and I remember seeing the newsreels on Saturdays during the war with all the bombed out cities and the incendiary bombs that would just gut all the buildings, just burn them up. It was just awful. And when I was going by train through Würzburg, I remember looking out the window and seeing it was early morning hours, the shadows of those buildings that looked like the newsreels were all burned out or had been just destroyed.
I really enjoyed doing this interview. Miss Laney was amazing. She lived a very adventurous life, and she just traveled everywhere. And I loved learning from how her generation is totally different from mine, and that I just hope I have such an adventurous life as she did. And yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Hi, I'm Victoria Goslin. I'm 18 years old and I've lived in Dothan my whole life. I've recently graduated and I'm headed to Loyola, New Orleans in the fall. My father has served on the board here at the museum for a while, and I've been coming here for as long as I can remember. I'm really excited about this project and about my involvement with this project because I find that there's so many stories that are not told or unsung, maybe. And I'm really just thrilled to be able to help sing them, help deliver them, and bring them more to light.
Hi, konnichiwa. I'm Carol Hara. I live in Dothan, Alabama with my husband of 55 years, and I am 77 this year. But anyway, I think this program is really important, and I appreciate the Dothan Museum to do this. And I think it's important because it gives insight of life of Japanese Americans like us. And so I appreciate every bit, all the questions you've asked me. Thank you. Well, when we moved here, there weren't many Asian people here, especially Japanese. I think we might have been the only second family that were both husband and wife. Wow. Being Japanese. But we did want to bring awareness to the public. And of course, there's a lot more adversity here now. But can you imagine almost 50 years ago, not many. I think we had one Chinese restaurant, but no Mexican restaurant.
Well, not in the 50s.
No, right. But anyway, so, just to bring awareness and to let people know, even now, people ask us how long we've been in the United States.
Really?
You see? And when we first moved here, I didn't even know I was Japanese. Can you
really?
Imagine? I didn't even know, because when you're in California, we grew up in Fresno, California.
Okay.
Well, people don't ask you, well, how long you been here? Because it's so diverse.
Right.
And in fact, the high school that I went to, Edison High School in Fresno, well, that was the first school in the whole United States that was most diverse in ethnic people, you see. All different ethnic minorities, plus people from Europe and from Asia. Wow. So, we grew up with all kinds of people. We were just I think we're just really fortunate. So when we moved here to the South, well, how long you been here? Like who? Me? So I want to bring awareness that not just people that look like us. Anyway, just to bring awareness that there's other people that have been born in the United States for centuries.
You were born in an internment camp, and you were 5. That's what I've understood.
I was, let's see, 7 years old.
You were 7.
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't know how long you were there.
Oh, well, I
About
was
3
born
years.
there 3 years.
So you were there for 3 years.
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't know how how much you remember, if anything,
No.
or if you remember anything from that.
Well, the thing about it was, you really didn't have a whole lot of time to pack up and go. In other words, I believe we had 5 days.
Really?
Right, they started rounding up all the Japanese, and they put them in little kind of like a congregating place for all the Japanese. You couldn't go anywhere. Some were sleeping in stalls of horses or whatever.
That's right.
And anyway, all I know is that you couldn't carry anything that would be, used as a weapon. So you couldn't take anything like kitchen utensils or anything like that. You just had to basically pack up your clothes and leave. So they put a ticket on you, just like you see in some of those movies where they got tickets. They give you shots. We end up at the train station. We get on the train. We're going to Phoenix. Of course, at that time, we didn't know where we were going. I didn't know.
Good.
But when we get to Phoenix, everybody gets off the train. They load us up into these big old semi trucks with the rails on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So you're hanging on and you're going into the desert. And that was it, I mean, all I know is when we got there, there used to be a barbed wire fence around, and these MPs, or whoever they were, with machine guns, they had nothing to do because nobody ever tried to escape.
Yeah.
You see, there was nothing that happened there that would get people to think that, hey, some of these guys are not on our side. Okay,
Right.
so, and plus that, you got 60 miles of desert to cross. Where are you going?
Yeah.
You don't know. So, that was the camp life.
Well,
Yeah, times are tough back in those days, and like I say, the old folks who all they know was work, because most of these folks that were in this camp were farmers, okay? And the thing is, here you are stuck in a camp, you don't know, nobody tells you anything. You don't know how long you're gonna be there. And it was, like I say, so hot that those old guys would dig like a basement underneath the barracks just to keep cool.
wow.
Because it's 120 in the shade, and hey, let's face it, there's no shade.
Right.
So, they would sleep down there. But the bad part of that was Arizona's got these scorpions, or even rattlesnakes that,
Wow.
some of them don't wake up, because they were just down there.
Mm-hmm.
But that was about it. I don't really remember. Matter of fact, we were trying to think of what kind of food we ate, and I had no idea. The only thing that I really liked was this applesauce with cinnamon, and put that on bread, and that's probably what we ate.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway.
So obviously wasn't the
Well, I tell you what, it was kind of different because first of all you saw was Japanese people. When I was going to school in Fresno, it was kind of mixed, right? But all of a sudden, it's all the same, you see? And that was kind of interesting. I guess that's about it. Life goes on.
best. Right.
You just gotta forget about the past and move to the future.
Very
That's all
true.
there is to it,
Very true.
yeah.
So, other than that, like I said, we just moved forward. You know, my parents, thinking back, I wish I could have asked them more questions, but they never really talked about being incarcerated, just a few things, but it was nothing was really negative. They always said, just work hard, study hard, you know, and we would just move on. And they really worked hard. And so they instilled in us all of that. So we're grateful.
My name is Leslie Stephen Kraut. I live here in Dothan, Alabama.
Okay, so you grew up. Did you grow up in Dothan or?
No, I was born in the Bronx and raised in Jersey City.
Okay, so when did you move down to Dothan?
2000, I think it's 2011.
Really?
We lived in Campbellton, Florida, 2005,
Okay.
and then we moved up here.
Well, what brought you to Dothan?
What brought me up to Campbellton from South Florida was my Navy buddy for
Okay.
over 51 years.
Really?
And we lived next door to each other until my wife got sick and she needed physical therapy and all. So driving back and forth from Campbellton to Dothan was too much. So that's why we decided to move up here. And she passed away this past year, December the 13th.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
So you served in the Navy. Was that just something that you grew up like?
Well, I joined the Navy. They had, in those days, they had what they called, you went into reserves.
Mhm.
So on your 17 years old, you had to finish high school.
Mhm.
So at 17, I joined the Naval Reserve, and I stayed 1 year. After the 1 year, you already made Seaman First Class, so you're ahead of everybody else when you go to boot camp and everything. So I was Seaman First Class. So I went on active duty October the 2nd of 1964 on the USS Cadmus, which was repair tender AR-14. And I got discharged from it October the 1st, 1966.
Wow.
But I served until May 28th of 1969.
Okay. All right. So is that something that seeing your father serve? Is that
No, it was
something-
very funny. When I was about 10 or 11 years old, they had Fleet Week in New York City.
Mhm.
And I was on the USS Wasp, which is an aircraft carrier,
Mhm.
a World War II aircraft carrier.
Mhm.
And I said, I'm going to join the Navy when I grow up. I fell in love with it. And they all laughed at me until I turned 17.
Wow, that's really cool that you kind of sparked your interest at a young age.
Well, it paid for my college education.
That helps also. That's very attractive, I'm sure. So your dad, was he still serving in active military?
No, he got out right after the war.
Okay.
We didn't even know this until we got a hold of his service record after he died.
Really?
He was a first sergeant and a sharpshooter.
Really?
And he was an airplane mechanic here in Camp Rucker.
Oh, okay.
And he served with the brother that's in the picture there. He went over and was in the Patton's army, and he was presumed dead in the Battle of the Bulge because he was missing in action.
Wow.
His name was Irving Kraut. My father's name is Emmanuel Kraut.
Wow. So how long was he stationed at Fort Rucker here?
The whole time he was in the service, I think from 44 up to the end of the war.
Really?
He loved it here in
He
Dothan.
did. Did he experience any kind of animosity towards?
No, not that he ever said.
Really? I didn't know if growing up Jewish or if it was any.
No, in fact, in those days they had buses as you were off on a Friday night or Saturday. They had buses going here to Dothan, Alabama, to the synagogue that's there, Temple Emmanuel.
Mhm.
My mother always spoke highly of that.
Mhm.
I was on a Navy ship, and I had no problem. I was on it for 2 years, and I was the only there was 8 of us that was Jewish, and we had no problem. I'll never forget though, the first, I think it was either Christmas, I think it was Christmas, and we were 963 men, including officers, but we had to make the meals, and I was mess cooking at that time, not a food cook, because I just got on board the ship in October. So I was mess cooking, and it was my job to make the hams, and I never saw a ham in my whole life being Jewish. So I followed the directions, and the captain came down and said, "Who made that ham?" And one of the guys yelled out, "The Jew boy." He chewed him up and down for it. He said, "Let me never hear that again." He came over to me and said, "It was the best damn ham he ever tasted." And I turned around and said, "I couldn't tell you, sir, because I don't eat ham."
Well, there you go.
No, I hadn't. No, in fact, we went over to the Med, and we had a Father Kugler on board. Most Navy ships don't have a full priest as your chaplain, and we did. And he even got me for Passover around that just passed the holiday. He got us wine and he got us matzah that we would have it, and the wine was rationed by him. We went to his office, we said the blessings, and he gave us a little cup of wine.
Wow.
Because you know, I have alcohol on board a ship, only for medical reasons or for religious reasons.
Wow, that was pretty cool.
So I had no problem with that at all.
That's pleasantly surprising to hear.
All I know is my mother said that she loved the temple here, because they couldn't come here every Friday night because sometimes he had work to do, you know, but they had buses. And how I know this, I didn't even get this from my mother. I got that from one of the members of the congregation, was Frida Katz, who passed away a number of years ago, only a few. And she told me, I said, "Is there any record, did they ever keep the names of the souls?" She said, "We had too many of them coming to keep a record of it." But they had a regular meal for them, which was nice. And buses from Camp Rucker came here. But I don't think you want to hear that. I was stationed in Brooklyn Navy Yard from September until October the 2nd. Around the end of September, right before, because the Jewish holiday at that time was late and was earlier, I went to the Gidunk, you know, that's where you can have beer, and I was 18 years old then, so you were able to drink, even if you're underage, because you're in the military and you're on the base. And I'll never forget, one of the young ladies that took all our paperwork as a nurse was sent over to Saigon. And this relates to what you have the pictures up there. And I remember telling this to my father, because when after Cali, I don't know if anybody remembers Cali, but he was the one that had the Marielane massacre, where women and children were killed. And he was tried for that as war crimes and court-martialed. And I turned to my father and said, "You know, there's nothing innocent in Vietnam." Because when I came home, I had to bury a friend. But going back to the original story, we got a letter, and it was read to us, and I'll never forget her name. Barbara read the letter, that this young kid came in crying his head off, may have been about 7 or 8 years old. She put her arms around him to see what was wrong, and he pulled a grenade and killed her and 3 other people. So there is no, when you talk about war, you never know what you're going to run into. And I'll never forget that story as long as I live. I'll never forget that story. Because we all knew her, because she was the head nurse at that time. She was only about 23, 24 years old, but she handled all the paperwork for people to get connected to the ships. Make sure your injections were up to date and all the medical records were. So that relates back to those pictures you have.
Yeah, definitely.
It hasn't changed. You still have children being used as human bombs, and you don't know. You know, you look at the old pictures of World War II where the GIs were handing out candy to children. It's a complete different thing today.
Why do you think that is?
Man's inhumanity to man. Simple as that. I mean, you got a Holocaust working right now in Africa. Chad has nothing, no raw material, nothing of value, and people are starving to death. You got problems in Rwanda. You don't have to go to Afghanistan.
Seeing the horrific things that are happening around the world and just an alarmingly frequent amount and I mean, you compared them to another Holocaust. Is that something that you feel particularly called to be affected by, or called upon to enact some amount of change within it, or do what you can, or what does that invoke in you whenever you see these things happening or hear about them happening?
I don't think we can't solve all the world's problems. We can't. It's impossible. No president alive or no person alive or no government. We tried. We tried in Vietnam to solve a problem. We got out of it. Now we got free trade with Vietnam. We can't solve the world's problems. That's the saddest story. I mean, you find when you're on a Navy ship and you're out to sea, it's a lot different. Everybody has to pull their own weight, so you don't have the problems like you would have in a corporation with outside influences. I mean, everybody depends on you doing the job.
So, what did being in the military provide your family? Because obviously there is benefits. So, what would you think those benefits are?
Well, in my case, I sent money home. I wasn't married, so there was no BAQ or anything like that. But I was able to save a lot of money because you only have a lot of money when you're out to sea. And so that was but the GI Bill that I have, I don't know today is a lot more money going into the GI Bill as far as, getting the education. But I took a USAFI course, I took German as a language. That's how I met George, because he knew German, so he helped me with it. And I was helping with the English course. But, so that's what helped me, and it paid for all my college. The year I went to Rutgers and everything. I mean, the sad part is the day I came home, that's Saturday, I went to the Catholic Church to bury one of my friends in uniform. He was over there for 1 month. He was in a Jeep with a lieutenant. They went over a mine and the Jeep blew up.
It's not Vietnam.
Vietnam.
The whole point of the film is so the younger generation can connect with an older generation and they can sort of learn from each other. So why do you think that is important for
Because we don't have it in school. He who does not know history will live to repeat it. We see it all the time. We see it all the time. We got into Vietnam, right? Now we're from Afghanistan. We had one mistake with Vietnam. We had another mistake when we went into Afghanistan. We thought we can do it better with the French, when the French went out of Vietnam. When Russia went out of Afghanistan, we went in, and we're still there.
So based off the interviews that I've done, I think it's been really enlightening to see, a different point of view, a different side of the story from what I've experienced, because I was raised here, grew up here, but of course I'm going to have a different experience from someone who comes in later in life, or someone who is just raised differently than me, plain and simple. So being able to see that different point of view, that different story, and to be able to help hear it and help tell it has been really interesting and really enlightening for me.
We interviewed Mr. James Johnson today, and he definitely has many stories to tell. He is very active in his community, and looking up to him as a grandfather or a father figure, I can say that he looks out, he's a family man. He makes sure that whatever he learns and whatever knowledge that he does gain, he put back into his community, and he let the generation after him know that it is better days, but we have to confront our problem to heal. And that's what I really got from him. And just sitting there watching him tell his story about Mr. West Johnson, it brings to the forefront of the things that we should make sure that we are researching about, that we are open to communicate about, and not be scared to go forth and like dig into something that we are interested in. Don't stunt our knowledge, because that's what I did. That's what I've done. And just being engaged with him today in this conversation, after today, I'm gonna make sure that I read the book Jubilee that he suggested, and go to the museum in Montgomery. Like, I have to, the Legacy Museum, if I'm not mistaken. And it makes me want to, like, eager to learn. So I hope, I'm 24 years old, so I hope the generation that's my age and younger than me will go out and educate themselves more, because at the end of the day, we need that. We can't go in our future if we don't learn from our past. Not trying to live in the past, but actually just learn from it and progress.
My name is James Johnson. I'm from Abbeville, Alabama. A retired educator. Married, have 5 children. A descendant of Wesley Johnson, who was lynched in Henry County back in 1937. A distant cousin of mine.
Okay. You discussed about growing up and seeing that no one wanted to talk about the current issues and that they let them happen. How was the lifestyle growing up within your household and in your community?
Lifestyle in those days was much different than it is today. My grandmother took 8 of us at one time. The youngest being 6 months of age. I was the second oldest child, and so we didn't really have. We had a social life, but my grandmother grew up before the Depression, and so one of her ideas was that children had to learn how to take care of themselves. She taught us a lot of things. She taught me how to cook, how to wash clothes, how to iron, how to clean home. And I got mad with her one day and I asked her why they have to learn how to do all this stuff. The other boys didn't do it. She said, well, if something happens to me, you'll be able to take care of yourself. And if you ever get married, you'll be able to take care of your wife and your children. So from that I learned. She said, otherwise, if you don't know how to do all this stuff and your wife gets sick, then all your in-laws will move in with you, So I knew I didn't want that to happen. So she taught me well. And so we did have a social life, but most of my life, from the age of about 5 years of age, until I went to the 11th grade, going to my senior year, the only thing I had to look forward to each summer basically was picking cotton. In the fall of the year, I picked up pecans, I swept yards, people's yards, sweeping up leaves and stuff like that to help earn money, to help my grandmother take care of those other siblings. And I worked in a food store where they didn't pay me money, but they would give me the food they were going to throw away, such as molded meat, stale bread, not lettuce, but cabbages that, were brown. But my grandmother was very, she was a genius when it came down to preparing food. She'd take that dry bread and she made bread pudding. She would cut the meat up, cut the mold off the meat, she'd boil it, and we ate well. So what they thought was junk, it turned out to be a jewel when it got into the hands of my grandmother. So she was very creative with stuff like that. So I did a lot of things like that to help take care of my siblings.
What school did you attend again?
I attended Henry County Training School, which was located outside of Abbeville, about 5 miles outside of Abbeville. But before that, I attended what was called Abbeville Junior High School, which was they called it the colored school there in Girard. It was an old wooden building, but the principal there, Principal L. O'Brien, moved here, and he taught us the importance of to dress properly, because every Friday, every boy had to wear a shirt with a tie. Even with that old wooden building, we had to keep it clean, inside and out. And before we graduated from 9th grade, they had what was called an oral talker contest. And every student had to participate in that. That was part of the graduation. Or you had to be a part of the oral talker contest, where you stood before the student body and parents, or whoever was there, and you had to do about a 5-minute speech. You had to dress properly, you had to know how to stand and how to introduce yourself. Then I moved on to Henry County Training School. I think it was in 1960, 61, and I was there until 64 when I graduated. That was quite a sort of a sad situation there, because a lot of times we didn't have water. You know, they had pumps. Sometimes the pump wouldn't pump water up. So if you were playing sports outside, which we didn't have an inside gym or anything, sometimes we didn't have water to drink. So segregation was really a punishing and a dehumanizing system that was, I guess, designed to break our spirits, but all it did was that it pushed us even harder. And we've had so many kids who graduated from Henry County Training School who've done well. Went on to graduate college, became professionals in so many different areas. So we benefited from that system tremendously, and I'm a product of that system. Now I have friends that also, one of my friends, we grew up together, he became a state legislator for Henry and Houston County. So what was meant to cause us to not succeed actually propelled us into a world of success. I was a little boy, probably about 5, 6 years of age, I guess. I remember I was a little boy. And she told me about that I had a cousin that had been lynched. And being a little boy, I didn't really understand the severity of the word lynched. And, but the way that she described it sort of made me scared. And I remember that she was holding my hand, real tight. She squeezed my hand. And I guess perhaps as I got older and can reflect back upon those conversations, because she mentioned it several times, I guess as a sense of trying to warn me and at the same time protect me. Because, as a child, I just didn't see the dangers. When I saw a white child, it was just just another child, just different color. And so we were told that we were not to touch white people or white children, say yes ma'am, no ma'am. And I always want to know, well, why I gotta say that? Or why I gotta go to the back door of their house when they walk in my front door? Why? But I was always told that that's just the way it is. And don't ask too many questions. Now, the older people never talked about Wes Johnson. My mother, who was born in 1927, was only about 9 years old when Wes was killed. So she was more open and willing to talk about that than the older people. The older people would tell you, well, that's nothing that you need to talk about, or just don't bring it up. Let sleeping dogs lie. But the more they told me to let sleeping dogs lie, the more my curiosity was awakened. I think the University of Michigan had a blog on there about him, about his life. When I was a youngster, I was told that he went to deliver a letter to this young white woman from the man he worked for. And when he knocked on the window, the husband was at home. And so this is when Wesley fled. And this is when the mob began to look for him. But later on, I was told that he was actually involved with this white girl. And I read the transcript from the court that the question was asked of the husband, did your wife get on her knees and beg you not to kill Wesley? And that's when his attorney objected, so therefore he did not answer that question. But the word is that there was a relationship going on with them, and that he was brought back, stood there across the road from where the woman lived, she and her husband, and that the husband was given the first opportunity to shoot him. And then after he shot him and fell into the ditch, then the others began to shoot him. Then they took a rope and strung him up in a tree.
Is there an image of him in the tree?
Yeah. Now the Dothan Eagle had actually had a picture, but they cut it out into a silhouette. The Dothan Eagle they had taken a picture of it, but the only thing they showed in the paper itself was the silhouette. And yes, there is a picture.
So I read also that you and your family chose to allow that image to be shown at EJI. Is that right?
Yes.
And you thought it was important. Why did you think that was important?
To let people see that it really happened. To see the look upon this young man's face, that it was real. It was not fantasy. That human beings had done this to another human being, and they need to see what it looked like. Because in those days, there have been pictures where many whites, when there was a lynching, they would, publicize it, and people would bring picnic baskets and put on their Sunday best, and they would, it was, to them, it was just a Sunday outing where they would actually go and see a person lynched, sometimes burned alive, beaten, parts of their body cut off. This was entertainment. And so people have to realize that these things happen. And so I, in my own way, I began to rebel in Abbeville in ways that could have gotten me killed. But the Lord had a hedge around me. I was able to do things and say things that might have gotten other people killed. It wasn't bad things, but I just had a lot of questions that I needed answers to. And so I began to seek those answers. But I must say that when I left the South in 1964, I was a very bitter young man. I was full of hatred. I hated myself, I hated my race, I hated white people, I hated people, period. And the reason for that is because I wanted to know why my race had been subjected to such inhumane treatment. And all I would get was, that's just the way it is. That's the way it always has been. But when I went to college, I found out differently. That's not the way it was. And that's not the way it always has been. Slavery is what brought about this type of attitude, particularly in the United States and the Caribbean and so forth. But the diaspora of the blacks happened because you can find us anywhere in the world. So we were a scattered people. But I didn't know all this, and I majored in black studies when I was in college because I had to find out what and why. It didn't matter whether I got a job or not. That was for me. And until you know who you are, you will continually act like somebody else, whatever they call you, because you don't know that you might be the descendants of a king or a queen. You don't know that. So, but once you learn that, just because you call me this, it doesn't make me who you call me. I only answer to what I'm called. No, I'm sorry, how'd that go? You only answer to what you're called. That makes sense? Makes sense. Okay. So you don't answer to names like that. And when I was growing up in Abbeville, sometimes a white man would call me a boy. I would answer. They would call my grandmother Amy. So I asked the insurance man one time, I said, are we related? He said, what? I said, are we related? He said, why you ask that? I said, well, you call my grandmother Amy. Is she your aunt? And so, this guy gave me a look like, And my grandmama overheard it. She said, listen, you cannot talk to white people like this. The civil rights movement was going on in Abbeville. I actually got in the march that day to help integrate one of the cafes uptown. And so my grandmother got a phone call. And whoever was told that she needed to chastise me because she didn't. I was going to get in some serious trouble. And so my grandmother told me, she said, listen, you don't have to live here. Yeah. I do. So, you know, I knew what that meant. Now, I wasn't going to stay here anyway, but I didn't want to cause any problem for my grandma, nor for my siblings who were still here at the same time as well. But I did tell my grandmother that I would not allow anybody to take me anywhere and do anything to me. If they're going to kill me, they got to kill me right where I am. They're not going to take me out to no woods or nowhere and do that. I think this conversation was so important because I think there's an old Jewish saying that he who does not know his history is doomed to repeat it. I'm quoting that from someone. And so I think that it's so important because I do see the demise of the black race, particularly with this younger generation, because of our lack of respect, our lack of education, our lack of knowledge. And I think that we put our priorities and we've allowed our children to put their priorities in the wrong places. And until we come back to the basics of family, men doing what they're supposed to do as far as their children are concerned, and of course mothers not trying to look as young and as pretty as their young daughters are, and each person stay in their respective place. Nothing wrong with looking good, but I still think that children need to know that they need to stay in their places. That you can love your children and respect your children, but at the same time, we must get back to the base, and that is to teach our children. Because I am so tired of looking at black athletes when they make the draft and when they become famous. My question is, where's the daddy? It's always the mom there, but where's the father? So I think this interview is important, not only for blacks, but for whites as well. Because the only way that we're going to heal is that we got to acknowledge that there was a problem. If I had a cut on my arm and I ignored it and it began to infect, and I ignored it, it's going to get worse. But I got to acknowledge that this is a problem. What I want to do about it, do I want to get well? It's going to bring about a scab, but I don't want to pull that scab off because I do that, I'm going to reinfect it. So we got to open up and discuss these things. I think we'll all feel better about it.
Hi, my name is Jamal Morris. I am 17 and I am a student at Northview High School.
Is Marvin B. Jack Cox. I live in Dothan. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I went in the Army in 1956 and retired in December 1975. I was in Vietnam for 5 tours and commanded aviation units while I was in Vietnam.
How old were you when you started in the military?
17.
17 years old.
Actually, I was 15, but they think I was 17.
Was that hard for you? Whenever you weren't able to be with your family?
No, I don't think so. At any given time, it was a little scary, and it was when you first went in country, it was difficult to adjust and to look at another 12 months in the face of living in this tent for another 12 months. Once you got over that, then it was life as usual. You're with your friends, you're flying, you're socializing at night, sitting around playing cards and talking, and whenever you're off, you're really using it to the max. So I think for the man, it's a lot easier, particularly in an aviation unit. If you're an infantry guy and you're laying out in the woods with the snakes and the snails and the leeches and you don't even have to see a bad guy, you're just living in these terrible conditions. So that's a much different scenario than when you're an aviator. I was an infantry officer, so it was the next thing I could do. If I didn't do the aviation thing really good, then I'd be walking around on the ground. So it was sort of a motivating factor to be a great aviator.
Okay. Were you ever afraid?
Sir?
Were you ever afraid? Like whenever it came to like anything happening during the war, were you ever afraid?
Oh, yeah, everybody's afraid, but there's, there's a difference between being afraid and being scared and being afraid. Being afraid is with you always. I never had that, and some people did, and that's a terrible way to go. Just saying boo and scaring you, or shooting at you one time and it scares you and you jump, that's a different, it just scares you, but that goes away very quickly. Fear is a terrible, terrible thing, because it lingers, it stays. And I had friends that happened to, and they had sleepless nights, had a terrible year. They, it just didn't affect everybody the same way.
Did it take you long to adapt to like the environment?
What?
Did it take you long to adapt to the environment of war?
Yeah, I'm good about adapting. I've traveled the world since then, and I ride motorcycles, and I jump out of airplanes, and I fly airplanes, and so, those things all sort of climatize your emotions and your reflexes and your ability to adjust to situations, so that when you get in just an ordinary everyday environment where it's difficult, you can go float right through that. It's a lot easier. So it's all, I was trained so young that I'm not saying that they make you a super guy, but they can fix you if you and get you climatized. All this training and that when you run around Fort Benning and Fort Jackson, Fort Polk, Louisiana, in the woods, that's not just because they want to keep you busy.
Yeah.
When you get in a bad situation, those things come out and you realize, I can do this. Give you a good example. I was in basic training. First day, this sergeant came through, blowing a whistle in the morning, woke us up, banging on the bunks with this piece of metal he had in his hand, turned all the lights on. Now that was shock, I'm telling you. It never happened to me again, because I got up before he got there from then on. But right after that, he fell us out into Company Street. We all stood in formation as such. We didn't know what formation was. And he said, today we're going to run 5 miles. Well, I could remember what 5 miles was. That was as far as from my grandfather's house to town. And I never ran that. I never walked that. I couldn't imagine it. Everybody sort of looking at each other. So we went out, and we were out for a long time, seemed like forever. We came back and told us to stand at ease. And he said, now, how many people thought they couldn't run 5 miles? Well, everybody put their hand up, because we didn't know what 5 miles were. We were just kids. And he said, you didn't run 5 miles, you ran 10 miles. And he said, let me tell you what, as long as you do what I say do, I'm never gonna ask you to do something that you can't do, because I know more about you than you know about yourself. And he did. And he said, so when I tell you to do something, it's okay to do it. You can do it. So that's a great lesson. It's really the challenge. You can do more than you think you can do.
So as you're in the Army, you did learn a lot of things, right? You learned things to help you do your job. What was that training like?
What was what?
What was that training like to help you get
the training?
Yeah.
Oh, there's no better training. I mean, they train. If you're going to be a helicopter pilot, there will never be a helicopter pilot can fly that helicopter any better than you, trained anywhere else that can fly it better than you. And they train you right here at Fort Rucker. I went here as a fixed wing pilot first. To give you a good example, I went from fixed wing, went to Germany, went to rotary, went to helicopter training, and straight to Vietnam. Never flew a fixed wing. I bought an aircraft, and I retired in 1975. 1992, I bought my first aircraft in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was flying it back home. I only made one landing in it. Flying back home, and the engine quit. I went through all the emergency procedures just like I had never forgotten it. I put it in a field, just like I knew. I went through everything. Everything was pop, 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 right in my mind. So that training just never goes away. And you just, it's invaluable. They've done it to so many men and for so many men. If you follow that and you abide by that, then you're going to make it. I'll give you another example. I get knocked off this motorcycle every so often. I was knocked off down in Fort Lauderdale, Pensacola last year. I got a no scratch. In airborne training, we learn what we call the PLF, parachute landing fall. And it's hit, shift, rotate. You do that so many times, you're jumping off a 4-foot platform so many times, you just get to where you do that naturally. And I've had people that have seen me, I've ridden motorcycles all my life, and I've had a lot of accidents, that have seen me, and I had it testified to again in Pensacola. We've never seen anything like that. When you came off that bike, I don't know, I'm reacting, I'm not knowing. But when I came off the bike, the only thing I did was I tore this pants leg. And the helmet hit a couple of times, scratched up. So that's how valuable training is, and how if you're receptive and you're ready to go, then fine. And it pays off in combat. I can tell you that when you get into a place like Vietnam. And that's the only place I was ever involved in anything like that was Vietnam.
Is it ever hard for you to talk about the war?
Nope, not at all. Some people it is. Everybody's made up different. I've got friends of mine who have deep-seated PTSD. I don't know what that is, so I know what it is when I see it in them. I know how it affects them, but fortunately, that hadn't affected me like that. I'm 82 years old. I'm still walking around here like I've always walked around with a little sore spots. Yeah. Can't lift my leg quite as high, but they're just a different makeup, and so some people experience things that I didn't experience. And the young people now coming out of Kuwait and Afghanistan, they're really experiencing some really terrible things. They're not all experiencing them either. Their death rates ours was 58,000, theirs is about 5,500 in the same period of time. But that doesn't mean they're not seeing some horrible things going on,
Yeah.
What are you going?
What's your most vivid memory of Vietnam?
Being shot down. I think, that sort of came to mind when you said that. I don't know, there's a lot of vivid moments, but you sort of got your mind running wide open then when you're trying to deal with all the things that are getting ready to happen to you.
Yeah.
But God has a lot to do with who you are and where you're going and what's happening to you. And I got one scratch in Vietnam, so I went through all that time without that, and I'm blessed for that. I have a lot of friends that didn't have that weren't afforded that privilege. And so maybe I was just kept here to talk to you today. And I might drop dead as soon as I said the last thing. But young people like you are what this should be geared to do, and the military is good at doing that for you. So
I believe that's all the questions I had for you.
Those are very good questions you made. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in the military.
Of course. Doing this interview actually taught me a lot, seeing as I did want to go into the military field. And it taught me that even though things may get hard, or even though I might be nervous about certain things, I'll always have somebody to have my back for it. I'll always have a good experience. Probably won't have the best experience all the time, but it'll always be good.